Right then, let's see if I can do a whole video about a naked lady without getting in trouble with YouTube.
Lady Godiva, can we have a few words, please?
It's pronounced Godiva, and I assume you want to talk to me about the Benedictine monastery my husband and I founded.
That's hardly the big story here.
Wezathala Mina Leovan, which is about as close as you can get to Hello Lovelies in 11th century Mercian Old English, apparently. Hello Lovelies. Folklore has been the lifeblood of RPGs since Gary first cracked open a medieval bestiary and went, yeah, that'll do. We've had that little sort of Slavic renaissance with The Witcher, all antlers, damp forests, moody brooding, and women who'll gut you after a romantic misunderstanding over which hole she meant. But honestly, we're sitting on a dragon's hoard of our own stories that have become neglected. They're weird, petty, horny, moralistic, and half of them sound like someone scribbled them down on a beer mat in a moment of drunken hubris and overestimation of their tale-spinning talents. I blame vats of small beer. Perfect for adventures, though, if you're willing to roll up your sleeves a little bit. So here's one of them. The Tale of Lady Godiva and Peeping Tom. Alright, picture this in your head. Diddly-doo, diddly-doo, diddly-doo. Medieval Coventry. Taxes up the wazoo. The Earl Leofric, if memory serves, was squeezing the townsfolk so hard that they were squeaking like wet leather. His missus, allegedly a proper looker, though it may just be because she didn't have shit all over her like everyone else, Lady Godiva. She's clearly got a bigger spine and various other parts than he does, and keeps nagging the greedy old geezer to give the poor sods in his lands a little bit of a break. And so he finally snaps after all this nagging, as you do, and says, "Tell you what, love, you ride stark bollock naked through town at noon, and I'll drop the levies." It's the sort of challenge a man issues only when he's deeply confident his wife won't call his bluff. In this case, he reckons he's on safe ground, because despite her bleeding heart, her ladyship is a pious, chaste and modest woman, so she's never going to do anything like that. Alright? When pigs fly is essentially what he was saying. But perhaps the fact that she is a pious, chaste and modest woman was why he was in such a bad mood in the first place. Who knows? But anyway, trouble is, she does call his bluff. Now the townsfolk, seeing her as their hero or heroine, they decide that they put the word around, Our Lady's doing us all a favour, and so we're all going to respect her modesty. So shutters shut, heads down, no gawping, and bless their cotton socks, or more likely woolen hose in that period, the townsfolk do it. They all shut up shop for the day when she's supposed to do her ride and shutter their windows and hide. The whole city agrees not to have a cheeky peek at a naked aristocrat on a horse, and that's practically a miracle in and of itself. Except there's one lad, there's always one, hopeless, curious, trouser-twitching busybody who just has to steal a glimpse. So he does. And that's Peeping Tom, allegedly. I think there's a wooden statue of him somewhere in Coventry. And he's instantly struck blind by divine wrath. That or Godiva's jubblies were too lovely for a mere peasant to see, or she was so pale that the sunlight reflected into his eyes. These are all plausible options. So he goes straight to horny jail, do not pass go. Never gets to see anything or anyone ever again. It's one of those tales that is part morality play, part don't be a silly bastard, and part be a good ruler. And it's entirely gameable. And yeah, he brought down the taxes, which is perhaps the least realistic part of the tale, which may be entirely apocryphal. Alright, so how do we turn such a thing into an adventure? How do you turn it to something that an RPG party might be interested in or might actually get involved in, instead of just imagining themselves riding nude through a medieval high street or catching an eyeful of their own. The hook is pretty good. A town that is having the screws put to it in terms of taxes so hard that even the pigeons are considering unionising for more bread. Perhaps Our Lady approaches the party discreetly. She wants to help her people, but she needs friends with a bit more backbone and a few fewer political constraints in order to do so. The job's pretty simple on paper. Build support, secure the route for her ride, handle any saboteurs, double-crossers, gawpers, and keep the damn shutters shut. Shatters shut. You're not fighting dragons, you're managing a city with all the chaos, gossip, and strategic incompetence that dealing with a city implies. So you end up juggling guild loyalties, because they stand to make out like bandits if the taxes go down, religious schisms, bribing criminals to behave for an hour, smoothing over clergymen who suddenly reckon modesty is the hill that they'll die on, and then comes the hour itself. Our Lady takes her noble steed and trots nakedly through town. Absolutely starkers. And the party's prep either holds or doesn't. If they've done well, then the town behaves like a single dignified organism, spares the lady her blushes, and the taxes end up reduced. Everybody wins, except whatever those taxes were going to pay. If they haven't done such a good job, then someone's going to be going blind, and it isn't going to be subtle. Now, the thing people forget in these fantasy worlds that turns up in versions of the Lady Godiva story is that the gods aren't just dramatic lighting sources for clerics. They are, in these fantasy worlds, present. And if you actually bother to use them, they may well be quite keen to hand out the odd supernatural pat on the head or smack on the arse, naked or otherwise. If your players encourage the town's restraint, protect the lady's dignity, and behave themselves, for once, then you could let the gods notice, or the god, depending on the setting. Not necessarily with some huge flaming column and a deep voice intoning, "Well done!" But little things. You know, things you can kind of slip past and put in without being overly dramatic. Maybe they resist the next fear that is caused in them. Maybe their wounds knit a little quicker, or maybe the shutters refuse to open even under pressure from a band of horny minstrels inside. Whatever the case may be. Miracles of manners, really. And if someone does decide to be a peeping Tom, then you can give them a proper celestial wallop. Blindness, cursed sight, or a mark that screams out, "This one's a pervert." A cosmic sex offenders registry, if you will. Not to punish, necessarily, but to help generate story as things go on. Actions have consequences, especially when the heavens are watching someone's self-control fail, and the gods are particularly petty. The trick here, as always when it comes to games, is to think through the implications of the setting and what these things mean. Don't stick your gods in the background like stage props. Make them active in the world the way they were in medieval mythology. If you make them real, make them felt. Take oaths and piety as seriously as people used to back in the stupid ages. A miracle like this doesn't just fix taxes, it reshuffles the whole civic deck. Guilds gain power as people have more money to spend, and then they take it instead of the ruler. The ruler loses face and is shamed by his wife. Perhaps he wears the cuckold's horns in the views of everyone else around him. Priests bicker over whether they get credit or not, because look how powerful our god is. It protected the lady. But then on the other hand, she shouldn't have rode naked through the town. And the next town over maybe decides to try their own version of the same thing, with buskers, miners, or half a dozen grannies wearing face masks or something. Who knows? Traditions start. Once you establish that the divine rewards collective decency, then maybe everyone's going to have a go at it. You know, they want to get the same kind of benefit. So think through the fallout, changes in law, shifts in economy, theological turf wars, and suddenly your party's one little job becomes prologue to a whole campaign about civic destiny and divine attention. Yeah, if the gods are real, as they are in most fantasy worlds, then society will tend to bend around them to appease them or to appeal to them, so they get something out of it. The miracles might be small, but it is very hard to get out of our modern mindset of an absent or non-existent deity that is not active in everyone's day-to-day lives, and to get into that medieval mindset where an oath or a blasphemy is actually something meaningful. Sure, let the miracles be small, but the implications can be big, and then the adventures start to fall out naturally when you consider things in that basis. Sang, obviously.
The world is full of terrible erotica, exacerbated by the existence of the internet and the low barrier to entry. And no, it's not just men describing women in terms of how their boobies jiggle. Now you too can churn out cringeworthy, barely literate erotic nonsense with filthy shades cliché. 2 players, one the dom, one the sub, fill out bingo cards with awful, awful words and props, and then try to fit them into their purple prose over several rounds of foreplay, sex, and aftermath. Whoever scores the most by working their words into their florid gibberish wins. This game was knocked up in an afternoon, but it only cost 50 cents, so bite me. Available at DriveThruRPG and post-mort.com.
The normal question, the first question is always, are these cannibals? No, they are not cannibals. Cannibalism in the true sense of the word implies an interspecies activity. These creatures cannot be considered human. They prey on humans. They do not prey on each other. That's the difference. They attack and they feed only on warm human flesh. Intelligence? Seemingly little or no reasoning power, but basic skills remain are more remembered behaviors from normal life. There are reports of these creatures using tools, but even these actions are the most primitive. The use of external articles as bludgeons and so forth. I might point out to you that even animals will adopt the basic use of tools in this matter. These creatures are nothing but pure, motorized instinct. We must not be lulled by the concept that these are our family members or our friends. They are not. They will not respond to such emotions. They must be destroyed on sight.